Well, thank you. Thank you for your kind words of introduction. And good morning to you all. And very grateful for this occasion and for the invitation to be part of this celebration. I guess simply like to observe that there's one small word that is missing in the title. And if you keep in this, then just introduce promotion just after dicastery. So it's a dicastery for the promotion of integral human development. So we have an assignment. We need to promote. We need to push it. So we're not just that, but promoting integral human development. And dicastery is like a ministry of any government. So dicastery is just a department in the governance of the church by of the Holy See of the Vatican. So a ministry for that matter. So my gratitude to Alliance of Religions and Conservation for the kind invitation to be part of this. It took 2 talks on faith in business, in finance. A very wonderful opportunity for business people, for investors to meet and reflecting together to discover the true role of business and investment in serving humanity. And I bear say, in this regard, you're not alone. Last year in January, I was invited to Chile and there to address a business community that had formulated a very interesting title for the conference. Normally, we're used to reading about the role of business in society. But this time, they changed that small preposition in society into for society. And so the meeting and the discussion was about the role of business for society, inviting us then to consider what business has to do for society and the role of business and significance and impact of business for society. Something similar, I think, is what has brought us here this second time here in Zug for this reflection. And this type of thinking is actually what Pope Francis calls for. And in his book, Evangelii Gaudium, he puts it this way. Business is a vocation, and a very noble vocation, provided that those engaged in business see themselves challenged by a greater meaning in life. This will enable them truly to serve the common good by striving to increase the goods of the world and to make them more accessible to all. And so, my dear friends, to live business and its related activity of investments as a vocation is what leads us, we discover, to entrepreneurial success, to personal happiness, and ultimately also to social justice. And I'm happy and glad for the opportunity to share a few thoughts with you this morning in this regard, as we gather to consider what you do, not in terms of profit and anything, but in terms of its noble character, in terms of its nobility. And so, I just would want to share a few thoughts with you about investment and the investor as carrying on a very noble vocation. And by way of a background, being here in your midst, I'm not an investor, and I probably will never be, although before I came to the Vatican, I was an archbishop of a diocese in Ghana, in Cape Coast. And of course, running a diocese, I needed to think about financial concerns of the diocese and all. And that kind of got me close on the path of impact investing And if there's time, I'll share a bit of my experience in that regard with you. But it's an experience that's just beginning, and that needs to mature. But it's an experience that I began in Ghana, and that followed me to the Vatican, to what I do now. But before that, let me just share with you something about our office, what we do in the Vatican, and this dicastery for the promotion of integral human development. Identify some of the core principles of the core business of this office or this ministry, and then see how we've tried to accompany business people and different other activities in society with these principles. And so this morning here together to suggest that the application of these principles can also provide some guidance to this type of business, to this investment group. So first about our dicastery, about our office, and about what we do. What is now referred to as the dicastery or the ministry for the promotion of integral human development is actually now a merger of 4 previously existing offices in the Vatican. A merger which Pope Francis called for last August with a document that he issued. And yesterday, when he visited our office, and that's why I couldn't leave Rome till late in the evening, he tried to justify his decision to bring these 4 dicasteries together. There used to be a ministry for health, a ministry for humanitarian assistance, a ministry for migration and itinerant people, Roms, even the circus group was part of this, and then a ministry for justice and peace, social events and issues. So these have now been brought together into what we now call integral human development. But the core business of this office is to promote a set of teachings in the Catholic Church, which is called the social teachings of the Church. And that's what I like to basically present to you this morning, and to also present how we accompany different forms of business activities with the support of this core business. So with this office then, the scope of the activities is to include the promotion of human rights, development, the environment, the economy, and several related issues, all of which contribute ultimately to justice and peace. And secondly, and most importantly, the task of our office is to deepen the social teachings of the Church and to attempt to make them widely known and applied. And known and applied is what I like to do basically this morning. And it is this. One stream of our work is at the level of global systems. And so in 2011, I came to the Vatican in 2010. That's when I left Cape Coast and came to work in the Vatican. And when I want to tease Italians, I say that's when I was sent into exile. And people don't want to consider living in Rome as being in exile. It's one of the best places everybody wants to be. But I say, so that's when my exile began. So in 2011, in the wake of the financial crisis that you all know began in 2008, we called for a reform of the international financial and monetary systems in a small booklet that we developed. This booklet ultimately brought me to Frankfurt, the Bundesbank, to kind of present it to different type of investors and all of that, and to defend, as it were, this thesis. Everybody agreed with the analysis that we made of the financial crisis, but when we called for forms of authority to control financial activities, they all said no. So while they agree with the analysis, they didn't want any controls on financial activities and whatever, as we were calling for. So that was one stream. And in January 2014, at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Pope Francis sent me with a message of his calling for a new political and business mentality to take shape, one capable of guiding all economic and financial activities within the horizon of ethical approach, which is truly humane and not simply an afterthought. So this was in Davos in 2014. Now, a second stream of activities in our office addresses the issue of economy at its practical business level. And this again led us to do a small booklet with the title, The Vocation of the Business Leader. And with that, we wanted to invite business leaders to consider what they do in terms of a vocation. And doing this, we recognized that we were using the word vocation in a new sense. Normally, in societies like, here, when you talk about vocation, people think about somebody who wants to become a priest, or somebody who wants to become a nun, or somebody who wants to become a religious brother or a monk. No, that's not what we meant. Vocation simply invited people to recognize that what they do also has a meaning in the plan of God for humanity. And that wasn't a usual thing that people were used to hearing. But so when we talk about the vocation of the business leader, we were trying to invite business leaders to recognize that the meaning and the significance of what they do is not limited to their own vision about their business, but to recognize the fact that their business also has a place in God's plan for humanity and for the universe. So that's what the vocation of the business leader was all about. And that small booklet, as I stand here this morning, has been translated into 16 different languages, in Chinese, in Polish, in Thailandese, all kinds of languages. And in 2014, we presented this in Beirut with an Islamic business community. So it's something whose principles are appreciated and is spreading. A third stream of our activities brings Catholic social teaching to bear on particular industries and activities, like mining, like agriculture, like decent work, as important sectors, and ultimately on business and investment. And this last bit is what I like to do here this morning. So yes, we're meeting with the big CEO of mining companies, Anglo Gold, Rio Tinto, all of this Glencore, all of this we're talking and dialoguing with them all. When we began, people said that these mining companies were coming to buy the church on their side to support their activities. That's not what happened. They came with the idea of wanting to change the image of mining. In fact, one of the expressions they used was that mining is referred to as extractive industry, which reminds people of going to the dentist to have their tooth pulled out. And they wanted to change that image and make it more friendly and be seen more as promoting the development of people and their societies. Yes, so we're talking with mining. And in January, we've been meeting also the big oil companies. We're talking also with the big oil companies to look at that business. And so we keep going. We think that with something that can provide accompaniment to all forms of business sectors. And we've done that with other business. And this morning, I'm just going to try to offer some of these principles to you as investors gathered here in Zug. So what is this core business of ours? My dear friends, the church's social teaching grounds the identity of Catholics or religious people, Christians essentially, and the values of what they do professionally and in society. Identity, values. Though we call it Catholic social thought, it's actually not just limited to Catholic social thought. We could also say Christian social thought and so on. Some of the principles that were quoted from the Chinese thing resonate loudly with some of the things that I'll be talking about. So, though Catholic, I'm encouraged to still talk about it here this morning, in this forum, for two main reasons. The first reason is, clearly, no one is born into a particular pursuit or a business. We first and foremost born into a family, into a community, into a faith group or none at all, and into a culture. That's how we first and foremost born, and then we evolve in our different communities and all. And so what our faith does is to provide the guidance as we evolve in the different directions that we pursue, we go. So faith is to guide our whole life. And the church's social touch or teaching, like any belief system, guides the choices that leaders can and need to make in the public or the social sphere of human existence, including business and investment. Secondly, why the name Catholic is still talked about this morning? Secondly, is because the church's social teaching is not just Christian or biblical or Catholic faith. The church's social teaching, in fact, is the insights of theology, philosophy, economics, ecology, and politics. All of these have been harnessed coherently to formulate what we call the church's social teaching. So it's not just pulling things out of the Bible. It's pulling things out of the Bible and confronting them with the basic things of philosophy, economics, and all of this to provide something that can provide guidance for the way we live in society and we live in the world. So, these are then guided places that place the human for full and its full and integral development at the center of our world systems and activity and thought. The church's social teaching is therefore a reflection of the church on social realities in the light of the gospel, but not just in the light of the gospel, but also in dialogue with the different humane sciences and society. With it, the church sheds the unfailing light of the gospel on the various changing situations of the human family. So the church's social teaching is not an ideology, nor is it some social theory as an alternative to capitalism or socialism. That's not what it is. Rather, the church's social teaching is a language of faith and reason together. It's not simply faith, nor is it simply reason, but it's faith and reason together. And it is as such that we provide its guidance and accompaniment to the various activities of man or the human person. So it straddles philosophy and theology, whose basic concepts are understandable by all. But in the case of people, believers and all, the gospel illuminates, deepens, and elevates these concepts, giving them a new and a whole new meaning and level. So, how do we apply this, and how do we make them accompany activities and professions of people? I will try. I'll probably sound as if I'm getting biblical, but that's not the point. Just to illustrate. A reference was made to the Reformation and Zwingli and all of that. So there is some Christian background here. So, for example, Jesus looks for more than faith in Christians and believers. Although on several occasions the gospel reports Jesus telling individuals that their faith has saved them or healed them, Jesus looks for more than faith in us believers. It is like what it's what Jesus himself first and foremost says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will be saved, but the one who also does something, does the will of the Father. And accordingly, James will say that faith without works is dead. And if you say you have faith but have no works, your faith is without meaning. If a brother or sister is naked and lacks daily food, and one of you were to say to them, "Go in peace and keep warm," what good is that as an expression of faith? So faith must lead to concrete works and activity. Therefore, the Catholic social teaching expresses a wisdom tradition that places us in touch with the living reality of Christ's presence in the world. And these social teachings help us to understand the social dimension of our faith convictions. Because faith cannot be private, and it is not a private reality. Faith is not a set of private convictions and private doctrine or even private worship. Faith is incomplete without a vision of the world and our own place within it. It is for the sake of important needs of the world that the Catholic Church has always been a builder of hospices, hospitals, schools, monasteries, and all of these. So, in this sense, we see several times some criticisms advanced, even by Jesus, about the way people live. Because there should be no gap between what we do and what we believe. But unfortunately, this gap does sometimes exist. And it's a gap and a feature of our existence that runs very deep. And so, for example, within the church, in 1965, there was this big meeting in Rome, subsequently referred to as the Second Vatican Council. And one of the things it identified was a divided life as one of the most serious errors of our age. The lack of connection between faith, which we profess, and how we carry out our daily engagements. And so the words of Jesus at the final judgment is, as long as this was done to somebody, it was done also to him. So with this then, the church's social principles help to bridge this gap and to help and enable people to bring what they believe into what they do. And in this regard, I'd like to make an application to why we gathered here, to business, to finance, and to investment. And the first observation I'd like to make is that a principled investment practitioner is one whose works are guided by his faith. So a principled investment practitioner has works guided by faith. And this means, for us, for example, in 1994, we tried to put together all the principles of social teaching that began with Pope Leo XIII, up to presently, in that time, 94, was still John Paul II. Now it's been expanded by Pope Benedict and now also by Pope Francis. So we need to update that work. But what we did was that we identified certain basic principles proposed to us by what we believe. And this is human dignity, and so human rights, the principle of common good, and therefore also the universal destination of the goods of the earth, the principle of solidarity and subsidiarity. These were principles kind of gleaned from the church's social teaching and offered to people as guidance. And so all are very relevant to finance and to business, as is stewardship of resources and the care for the environment. And so as you listen to these principles connected with the care for the environment, it sounds very much like the Chinese three principles that were just read to us. They apply to every area of life and the organization of all sorts, including business. We take them one by one. So, for example, human dignity. With this, we say that having been born in the image of God, every man and woman and a child possesses the dignity of being a person. Each and every person is an end in him or herself, never merely an instrument valued only for its utility. If we did consider any human being in these terms, we kind of demeaning and bringing him down. The dignity of a human person makes each and every person have an aim and dignity in his own self. So a person is not something, but someone. And Pope Francis gives eloquent expression to this principle of human dignity with his embrace of the poor, the sick, the disfigured, the homeless, and people outcasts who live in in the peripheries of human existence. The second principle is the common good, related with the other one of universal destination of the goods of the earth. The principle of common good states that each aspect of social and economic life finds its fulfillment when it places itself at the service of the common good, which is best defined as the sum total of the social conditions which allow people, either as groups or as individuals, to reach the full fulfillment of their lives and live it more easily. So the common good principle asserts that our plans and efforts must take into account the effect on everyone, not just a few or many, but all, and all living in the present and those still to come after us. It is when we think about the good of all such people that we think that our activities have more and more meaning and sense. So, that is common good. And related with this is the principle of the universal destination of the goods of the earth. This principle simply says that the good things that God created at creation in the earth are for the use of all, and not just some, but everyone, all of us. So that's the universal destination of the goods of the earth. The goods of the earth are for all, for the use of all, and they come together to form the common good. After this, we talk about the principle of solidarity. If we talk about common good, then it is an active commitment towards helping everybody to realize their common good. And concretely, it expresses and means love for one another. Pope John Paul II formulated this in an interesting way, saying that solidarity is not just a feeling of vague compassion for another person or a shallow distress at the misfortunes of people, but on the contrary, it is the firm and the persevering determination to commit oneself to the common good. And that is to say, to the good of all and to each individual, because ultimately we are responsible for all. We are responsible for everyone and for all. So solidarity helps us to see the other person not just as a kind of a statistical figure or an instrument of work, but as a neighbor and as a person whose good and whose success is our own good and our own success. But if solidarity makes us commit to the good of the other person, it should not lead us to overlook the potentials of the individual person. And so there is the principle of subsidiarity, which simply means that we need to help, the bigger group needs to help the smaller group to realize what its own potentials are. And it calls for respect and support by larger and more distant entities for the initiative, freedom, and responsibility of the smaller, more local entities. In other words, sometimes it means that a government should not try to do what a family can do and do better. Rather, a government should have a family to do what it can do and do better, rather than replacing family in what it can do. And sometimes a government can have a local entity do what it can do and do better than trying to do that and so offset whatever. So subsidiarity is rendering subsidium, is to help the local entity to become what it can do and do better instead of being replaced in what it can do and do better by a bigger group or a bigger entity. So this principle then is imperative because every person, every family and intermediate group has something original to offer and to contribute to society. And it is good that it's been enabled to offer its own contribution to the well-being of society. And ultimately, we can talk also about stewardship. Men and women are the cultivators and custodians of the good of creation. And so we read that a man or a person can indeed and must indeed love the things that God has created. And it is from God that we have received everything that we have in this world. And it is good that we respect them, revere them, and take good care of them. Interesting thing is that these days, Pope Francis doesn't look at the relationship between us and creation in terms of stewardship. That for him suggests some business model. He rather talks about care. So instead of being stewards of creation, he said we should care for creation because that's more affectionate and that shows more commitment and responsibility. So recently he wrote a small encyclical letter called Laudato Si, the care for creation. And in that, he refers to stewardship only twice. All the other forms of expression of our relationship with creation is in terms of care. Caring for the earth, our common home, and caring for everything that is in it. So, my dear friend, these are the principles of the church's social teaching. Dignity of every person, our common good, and the universal destination of the earth, solidarity, subsidiarity, and, of course, our care or stewardship of creation. And with these principles, we seek to provide guidance for the different activities that we exercise. I talked about mining, I talked about agriculture, the oil group and all, and this morning I'd like to suggest that the same principles can help businesses like the investment that you carry out or the different forms of business in which you may be involved. So our question now is not about business in general and society in general, that is abstract, but in the language of Pope Francis, we need to go beyond that, and it is we can no longer trust in the unseen forces and the invisible hand of market. Growth in justice requires more than economic growth. While presupposing such growth, it requires decisions, programs, mechanisms, and processes specifically geared to a better distribution of income, the creation of sources of employment, and an integral promotion of the poor, which goes beyond a simple welfare mentality. And so business leaders need to develop good habits of discernment, a process of discovering the good in the concrete here and now by employing the great principles of human dignity, common good, subsidiarity, and solidarity as beacons to shed light on this reality and as lenses to focus on it properly. So within the complex reality of business and the world of investment, these same beacons or lenses help them to make sound judgment and act accordingly about their investments. And I want to touch briefly about 3 ways in which this happens. The first objective is to try, by which we carry our discernment, is to try to invest in production of goods which are truly good. Because all goods are not good. And some of the things we may invest in may not really be good. The production of arms may be lucrative and high yielding, but nobody calls this good business. Human trafficking may be good and yielding, but again, the character of these may be questionable. Pornography and all kinds of stuff. So not all forms of business that we invest in are necessarily good. So the discernment process that these principles of the church's social teaching provide is to help us to discern about investing in businesses which are truly good and services which truly serve. Businesses have an ability or opportunity to provide what everyone needs in the very way of food, shelter, and so on. But are they truly good? The answer does not reduce to prices or to legalities. Rather, it should be asked, how do these products and services contribute directly or indirectly to human well-being? Customers are not just objects or consumers, but persons. And the products of whatever we invest in or do must lead to enhancing the dignity of the consumers as persons. Further, business must be alert for opportunities to serve deprived populations and deprived sectors of society. And solidarity with the poor is one facet of the service which business provides to the common good. A second area which challenges us and for which these principles provide guidance is that businesses should invest in the production of good work. By organizing good and productive work, businesses make a contribution to the community by fostering the special dignity of human work. Because work for us is not simply what we produce, but work also improves the dignity, the creativity, initiativeness of the individual person. So work does have two sides. There's the objective side of work, but there's also the subjective side of work. Work does not simply produce an item to be sold, but it also enhances the dignity of the human person because of the opportunity to be creative and the opportunity to exercise decisions in what they do. Further, in applying the principle of subsidiarity, it contributes to the full human development of employees by providing them with opportunities to exercise appropriate authority as they contribute to the mission of the organization. They also allow workers to influence the overall direction of the business and accept their right to participate in intermediary bodies and such as unions. In well-defined functions, the front line and the middle level should exercise authority and should receive the needed training and resources in order to succeed. And so in a time when knowledge and information continue to be increasingly important factors of production, applying the principle of subsidiarity can justify investment in staff in order to strengthen the initiative, innovation, and creativity, as well as a sense of common responsibility in companies. A third area is that the wealth we produce is really good wealth, and that its distribution also becomes fair and good. By being good stewards of the resources given to them, businesses create sustainable wealth through efficient and productive process that produces healthy profit. But generating wealth in a business is insufficient without the wider context of stewardship for the natural and cultural environment and just distribution to all stakeholders, not simply shareholders, but also stakeholders who have made the wealth possible and depend on it. 3 weeks ago, I was at the Catholic University of Washington participating in a seminar. And the title of the seminar was Profit for Good, or How Can Profit Be Good? And we had participating in that seminar very rich, billionaires in the United States, some of whose names are, questionable, make people cringe when you call those names. But they were there to participate. And they were welcome because, again, this conference hoped to provoke a change in them. So that's where you familiar with the Koch brothers? Yeah. Okay, so Charles Koch was there. He spoke after me. Okay, and he had actually just written a book called Good Prophet. And so it's ongoing. So, we think that with the principles we evolve from the church's social teaching, we can also, change wealth. Simply is not wealth, but must be good wealth in how it is acquired and how it is used or delivered. And so, these three objectives show that business and investment are multidimensional. They are not to be reduced to a single objective, such as maximizing profit or enhancing shareholder wealth, just as marriage should not be reduced to sentiments between partners and lovers, or just as education should not be reduced to credentials for career. Rather, a flourishing business, enterprise, investment contributes to a larger common good by investing in its threefold goals of purpose of goods, which should be good, good work, and then ultimately good wealth. So this is the framework, and these are the beacons and the lenses that church's social teaching as expressions and vehicles of faith provide to business people and their investment activities and cultures. And so in this sense, again, in the light of what we gathered here to discuss, faith generates principles which guide the discernment of the investment groups, investment areas, and the investment needs of a community, navigating the challenges of investment options and deciding on what is right and what is truly useful, instead of the ethically inadequate and sometimes even perverse. It is ultimately about business and investment guided by a genuine and a sincere anthropological sense, namely a genuine and sincere appreciation of the nature of the human person in society. And so the church's social teaching provides a solid direction grounded in fundamental truths about our human nature and destiny. And there is a nature which unites every human being on this earth, and which the different faiths seek to capture as a source of guidance, even for business and investment. And so, the church's social teaching, the business of our office, it can be considered like a moral theology put into practice. And it is a veritable tool for faith-consistent business and faith-consistent investment. So, my dear friends, I think I've bored you long enough. But I like to, draw the curtain. So, by way of concluding and closing, when, my dear friends, for example, it may not happen very often, but when it does happen, and, for example, we say the Our Father, we pray that give us this day our daily bread. And it's always an individual saying this. How can we then say, give us this day my daily bread? But we make it give us this day our daily bread. So it means at a certain point we tend to think globally about everybody in this world, and I hope that business leaders would understand that their vocation includes the need to satisfy the hunger and to overcome poverty all over the world. And can they go further? How can they help to overcome the exclusion and inequality of which Pope Francis speaks about so often? Can such new and emerging financial industries like the social impact investment, which has been talked about today, and which is a big business also at this meeting, in its diverse forms and the way it blends philanthropy and impact investing, be a response to investing for the dignity of humanity out of a sense of solidarity and realization of how goods of creation to be made known? it kind of pushed me in that direction very many years ago. When I was named bishop in Cape Coast in 1993, I entered the diocese and realized that this diocese or the church in very many mission lands are not like the churches in Europe with a lot of endowments and with a lot of money bequeathed to them and so reserves, and so that needs to be created. And bishops before me were used to traveling and making appeals and whatever, so it's a lot of grants. Several local churches and communities were founded from grants and from donations. Those are good, but they never allow any local community to undertake any serious projects, any meaningful, serious infrastructural projects. We talk about education, and we talk about the several healthcare needs of people. These are projects which are now financed by grants and donations. This requires serious investment. So that's what got me on the track of looking for alternatives. And so the first group I identified was the Catholic Relief Services of the United States. So I went to them and said, can you help me enter the investment market of the United States and look for alternatives? So instead of really landing there, they gave me a course of lectures about fundraising. And I said, that is good. Some of these principles we know, and we've tried them. For example, organizing an event and selling a plate for whatever. I said, when I turned 60, we did that. But the point about fundraising depends on the terrain in which you do fundraising. You cannot squeeze water out of stones. If you do fundraising in South Sudan, what can you come up with? And so I said, fundraising for me is not enough. Just that we need to occasion a shift from the culture of donations and grants to other sources of capital for local churches, their needs and their activities. And that's where we started thinking about impact investing. And it is still something that I think. So one of the big tasks of our office is trying to introduce bishops of Africa, Asia, and Latin America to impact investing as an alternative to grants and donations as a way of running their churches. We've organized 2 seminars, and we need to carry on. We need first to introduce them to this industry, and then help them to prepare people to be able to enter and engage impact investors. We need to help local churches to train people in business administration, financial management, and things like that, to be able to engage impact investors. So that's why we happen to create a kind of a shift, a paradigm shift. But that's a shift from how missionary churches depended on donations by missionaries who visited their country and brought some help to something which is more sustainable. And right now, our office is offering a blend of philanthropy and impact investment as a way of helping local churches access capital for the type of structures and the type of services that they need to provide as a church. And it is in that sense that I'm doing a search. And so I hope to find some answers here from the directions. I'm not an impact investor. I'm still learning the A, B's, and C's of impact investing, and I'm still a student in class 1 of impact investing, and probably have to be graded up. But the big thing that our office needs is basically that. I mean, the present migration crisis that has been handled, we do not deal with this by simply mopping the water, by simply dealing with receiving migrants and integrating them, but we need to also learn to turn off the tap. And we turn off the tap when we change conditions out there so that migration doesn't take place at all, although it's a right for people to migrate. So it's a feature that challenges us to help people to change the paradigms of living on several levels as local churches and all. And it is in this regard that I accepted the invitation to be here to speak, but also to learn from what I can, what we can benefit from and be able to share this with the very many other people that depend on our office. So thank you for your kind attention, and thank you for accepting the boring. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes.